Welcome. I'm Professor Rob Wolcott of the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. And I'm here today at 1871, one of the world's leading technology startup ecosystems. This is a place where the future is created. And we're privileged to be with Howard Tullman. Howard is the CEO of 1871, the guiding hand of the past few years of this immensely complex ecosystem of players. There are certainly entrepreneurs, coders, engineers here, but there are also investors, venture capital firms, all of the major universities from around the Chicago area, government organizations. Everyone's here to bump into each other and create new things. Howard, first of all, thanks a lot for having us.
I'm happy to be here.
Great.
And let me just say one thing about the who's here, which I think is
Sure.
a good starting point. And people think it's all complexion-challenged 15-year-olds, because that's who starts businesses these days. But what's so interesting is that we have age distribution. It's probably mid-30s is the average, but we have people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, because it's not simply people starting businesses.
Yeah.
It's career changers. It's serial entrepreneurs who are smart enough to say, you know what, I'm not going to invest in furniture and stuff like that before I know if my new idea is a viable idea. And then the last, and maybe the most exciting, because you understand how emancipating technology is today, are people with domain expertise and no technology. And we marry them to young technologists, and they build these businesses. And the respect and sort of the exchange of ideas between some 25-year-olds and some 60-year-olds is really astonishing. And I'm not sure, but I think the 60-year-olds are more excited than the 25-year-olds.
Well, I can attest to this. I mean, I would add another kind of individual you could call career changer, but even someone who's advanced in their career, very successful, they might not even be looking for a career change, but I know a number of people who say being here and engaging here inspires them and makes them better.
Yeah, absolutely.
It connects them with more of the future.
Well, and by the way, being surrounded by, it's hard to be surrounded by all kinds of people telling you why you can't do something. And here it's just the opposite vibe, and it's astonishing how much lateral learning goes on, how much mutual support there is. And just knowing that you're not the only crazy person in the room is a very, productive thing.
Well, but at 1871, though, you also, it's not just about creating the next food ordering app for the consumer and hoping that it works. It's really about B2B, business to business, about solving problems. And it certainly is nice to not be in an environment where everybody's talking about constraints all the time, which is what happens at established enterprises a lot. But at the same time, there's a lot of rigor, high expectations for people here.
Yeah, I think the gate is very simple. It's save me time, save me money, increase my productivity, help me make better decisions, change my status. That's about it. I mean, as you say, we don't have donut delivery services or pet dating sites as much as I think they should have a social life. It's just not here. So there is a real focus, and it's because of the strategy around exits. The strategy around exits is not rocket ships. It's not moonshots. Yeah. It's to build a whole series of companies, $20 to $50 million, give or take, in value, that can be folded into the larger enterprises that are throughout the Chicago system. There's like 40 different corporate headquarters here. They're desperate for this kind of help. And by the way, it's even become a fairly common observation that this is off-balance sheet R&D.
Right.
They are able to take money and run it through these newly reconstituted corporate venture arms that the CFO would not let them use to hire headcount internally. This way they get a 3-year pass on, it didn't work out, or it did work out, in which case they're then
and be involved, be at the table, experiment with things they couldn't actually do internally, or it would be very hard.
And by the way, the other largest single problem in large corporations, apart from the fact that peace is more important than progress, is...
Say that again?
Peace is more important than progress, right? Not disturbing the status quo, seeking consensus, which is a formula for mediocrity. But it's that they let bad projects persist. They let them go on for too long because nobody wants to be the bad in someone else's day. Because the nature of these startups is existential, if it's not selling, it's over. And so it's sort of constrained in a very productive way in terms of how much energy, and it sort of enforces the idea of opportunity cost.
So on this thought, earlier in your career had experience in large established enterprises. You've worked with them throughout the years
Sure.
as an entrepreneur, as a partner, as a supplier. What is different about running an established enterprise and running an entity like 1871?
You know, I think the biggest difference is that you can't order anybody to do anything. So you have to build a different kind of culture. And it starts with, I wrote this on the first day when we were designing the whole culture and philosophy of 1871. And I said that, you know, we're about expectations of performance and not rules of behavior. And that's the meat of what goes on here. In other words, we're self-governing. We expect people to act like grown-ups. We couldn't write a rule book if our life depended on it. But what we do expect is a certain level of performance, and how they get there is exactly the entrepreneurial journey. So number one is you to be a leader, you have to show people a vision and a path to get there.
Right.
But you can't understand the stuff for them. You know, and this is another interesting issue, that you can explain it to them all day long, but you can't understand for them, and so they have to internalize it. They internalize it because we're fierce. You know, my team of 25 or 30 people, you know, we believe we have to model the behavior every single day that we want the startups and the other companies here to absorb. There's a couple of interesting observations. One is, if you enter a culture that has a strong work ethic, it becomes your norm. You adopt it. Now, some enterprises grow in two different ways. You can grow by adoption, which means people get with the program, or by attrition. And I always say it's fine either way, because if it's not working, we're not going to drag you kicking and screaming to do that. And if it is, you understand that it's in your interest to become part of that.
So an environment where people stay and thrive, or they leave.
They leave, right, exactly right. And the other thing that's very interesting here in particular is that we found that to this enterprise, businesses become the behaviors they tolerate. And so we're sheriffs. We're like, no, our values, the way we look after each other, the way we respect sort of the property and the privacy of other people, all of those are part of what we want anybody to take away from here.
Businesses become the behavior they tolerate.
Right. The behaviors, right.
Give us an example of a situation that wasn't going well, to the extent you can, and how you resolved it.
Sure, I can give you the easiest case, which is the first phase of 1871, which was 50,000 square feet,
Right.
was built intentionally like a frat house. Absolutely. Feet up on the, somebody else's couch.
This must be innovative,
exactly,
because people
right.
are just doing whatever they want.
Doing whatever they please. All right, phase 2 and phase 3 have progressively been a little cleaner, a little more organized, a little more upscale, a little aspirational. And the messaging was absolutely clear. This is where I want to be. And the other part of that was also interesting was the original design was, if you got to 10 people, we'd kick you out because we'd want to make
Right.
room for new.
Right.
Now we're like, that's stupid. Why
Yeah.
would you send your winners out? Keep them as role models, employers, examples. And, that's another thing that we did. So we created an opportunity for them to stay and grow within the community. And 3.0, which is the next expansion beyond that, was yet another step up in terms of identity, in terms of a little more privacy. And by the way, I wrote about a year or two ago already that open offices are very challenged now. This everything is going to be an open plan is under a lot of pressure. We've resolved it in a variety of ways. We've got these phone booths that we brought in and distributed throughout the space. We've got a bunch of other solutions for that. But the idea that you just let anybody do whatever they please, that's not how we believe you can operate.
And I think a lot of people, when they haven't thought about it, do believe that the idea of unleashing all the constraints and just letting people kind of do what they want leads to innovation, but kind of just leads to chaos.
It does lead to chaos. I mean, and again, I can't tell you how many people don't understand the difference between invention and innovation.
Yeah.
To me, innovation is 100% risk-free scientific process. Absolutely risk-free.
Now, you're willing to stake your career on this, that
yeah.
innovation is a 100% risk-free
Yeah,
process.
because if you do it right, it's incremental, it's analytical, your behavior is being modified, you're adapting, you're learning. That's that process.
So what you're
Invention is
saying,
risky.
Howard, what you're saying, Howard, is not that you're always trying to do incremental things in the long run.
Right.
You might have a transformative objective, but you can do small things. What we like to say is manage the cost of learning, not the rate of failure.
Right.
And that allows you to do small things that manage risk.
Well, or as Warren Buffett, used to say, he'd rather find a 1 foot high thing to step over than a 7 foot high thing to have to high jump over.
Right. So on the same point, what's one thing that people get wrong about leading an organization, an enterprise like 1871?
Well, first of all, I think that they think that scale is all about engineers. And one of the most interesting things is after you get 3 or 4 engineers, you're done with engineers, because now the risk to your business for the next umpteen months or years is about support. Yeah. It's about support with customer service. It's about account management. It's all kinds of things that are not highly technical, but are
Right.
people-centric and customer-centric. Because, when somebody comes in and says, I launched a month ago and I'm in 47 countries, I'm like, you're doomed. You're doomed to try and figure out how to support 47 countries. Not to mention you've got 2 people in each of 47 countries.
Right.
So
and they're both engineers.
That's right. So we're both about nailing it before you scale it, and understanding that to grow the company you have to grow the infrastructure at the same time. I mean, and one of the things that is unique about the coast. Okay, I'm very resentful when people from the coast, either coast, but
meaning Silicon Valley or New York, Boston.
but the Valley, principally
Silicon
the Valley. One of the things people come back and say, you guys in the Midwest are reluctant to fail. You don't know what that concept is. And I'm like, we can read. This is about a 20-year-old idea. I think we've got that part.
Yeah.
What's different are 2 other things. One is the absolute acceptance of this idea of temporary employment, that somebody will walk in the door and say, I'm going to be here for 2 years, take your money, but you want me because I'm talented, but I'll be gone in 2 years because I'll have a war chest to do my next startup. Here in the Midwest, that's treason. It's like we don't get that yet. Okay, and then part 2 is scale is the real difference. Scale is possible on the West Coast to an extent that it may never be possible here. If somebody came in to the best venture fund in the city of Chicago, in the state of Illinois, it doesn't matter, and said, I need to buy tomorrow 15,000 servers, just wouldn't do it. Nobody is going to bet $100 million on that prospect. And
but
yet,
out there they do.
And yet most of the companies that have become the unicorns would not have survived. They didn't really simply grow up because of AWS. I mean, they grew up because somebody said, I need 10,000 servers and I need them next week.
Right.
And that's what's different. And we may never get there, but that's not the kind of bet we're trying to make.
Well, speaking of the bet you're trying to make, and one of the things that works here, one of the reasons at least I think we both agree this works, is that the Midwest has some of the great established companies in the world headquartered here. They have thousands of people across the Midwest, and they have become engaged here because they see this going on. And not to disparage Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is an extraordinary place, but they don't have dozens of major corporations headquartered
They don't have
there.
customers at all there.
Yeah.
I mean,
other than the tech industry and a few
but
exceptions.
when I talk to companies from Tel Aviv, for example, and they're like, we're going to open our office in the Valley.
Right.
And I'm like, well, first of all, where's the Valley?
Yeah.
And second of all, you're going to get right back on a plane, especially if it's your sales office, because that's not where the customers are.
Yeah.
And so it's just an oversight on their part, and it's really surprising. But the other thing is, in addition to having these big companies, their problems are so systemic and so consistent that what we've spent a lot of time here developing is a program around how do we really serve them.
Actually, let's talk about this now. You've said a number of times to me and to many others that there are a lot of people in the world saying, well, of course, what we need to do is get the startups and the big companies together. We'll throw them in a room, we'll do some pitches, and great things will happen. Sure. And you and I both know usually nothing happens.
Right.
Yeah, I think you refer to it as the entrepreneurial petting
Well,
zoo,
in the in the earliest phase, when 5 or 6 people would come down and walk around here and think that by some process of osmosis that some innovation would rub off, we call that the petting zoo, the entrepreneurial petting zoo. And the members were as resentful of that as
it was distracting.
the customers. Yeah, it was distracting, and there was no value on either side.
Right.
Now, our mentoring program, on the other hand, with 900 volunteer mentors from every major corporation in the city, 7,000 hours of one-on-one coaching this year, valuable for both sides.
Right.
The young companies see a customer, a client, an investor. The old companies or the more traditional companies see a look over the horizon. So that works.
And they also, Howard, share, here's a problem we have. Can you guys do something about it?
They didn't to date, right? They didn't to date. So here's what happens, and this is a conversation we have once a week with a Fortune 500 company, and we pretend it's new every time it happens. Okay, and it's always the same thing. It's number one, we're not generating enough new ideas internally. Number two, the people who built it refuse to break it. They're just engaged in bandaging, not bridging.
Right.
Okay, number three, we can't hire these young, talented digital or creative workers. They won't come work for us. They'll do sprints, but they won't come work for us in the long term. Number four, we have to do things today in months that we're doing in years. And we're seeing RFPs turn to stale, sort of solutions while they're still in the process of being built. You have to be faster and closer to the market. And then last, they are scared to death about the fact that all of the institutional knowledge, all the domain expertise, they have no strategy for transferring that down to the next couple of generations. Because these people don't read. They simply don't read. So what we've been doing is insisting not on a demo day, because the demo day, under the best of circumstances, you might see 10 interesting companies, but only 3 are relevant to you. I mean, so unless you came for the show, it's much better to do what we do, which is to curate a set of specific problems with the participation and help of the company, then go source
the corporations,
then go source the startups, then define the problems very clearly, and then we still have to manage the whole process. I mean, you know this because we've been in sessions together. There's a language issue where everything that you're taught as a young entrepreneur to use in the way of language, it's like salt in the wounds for a big company. The last thing you want to say is novel and innovative and brand new, because
let's be careful, because now today using the word innovative at a corporation sounds good. That doesn't mean they are actually doing it.
I get that, but it also, one level deeper into the organization, it reads as mistakes, retraining, problems, delays, costly, all of those things.
Am I going to lose my job?
So, so to steal a page from Hollywood, this is a business that's totally about high concept. It's like, it's this much different from what you've been doing all day long, every day. It's going to be this, it's Tom Cruise in whatever movie.
Legally Blonde.
But exactly, right. And it's that messaging that's really important, because it's important for them to understand that it represents just that kind of safe increment and not something that's radically different.
Well, speaking of the movies, you're one of Chicago's great patrons of contemporary art. You see the art all over 1871 and elsewhere as well. What can the arts tell us about making a place like 1871 successful? Why? I mean, is it just a nice thing on the wall?
Well, first of all, it started way back when. It started with Flashpoint. It started with a lot of my earlier
Flashpoint
businesses.
Academy
which was
school
a digital media college. And back then, I was scared to death that everything would be sterile and digital and whatever. And so we surrounded the place with all kinds of physical art. And we wanted to represent that there were different ways, different degrees of excellence, different ways to express that, different ways of creativity. But look, today, I think we're less concerned about it happening here. I think we've got it here. What we're concerned about is STEAM as opposed to STEM. We're trying to figure out, is there any viable strategy to get the arts back into there's a big push on STEM. But, without the arts, that really is not going to get there. It's really not going to be successful. So we've been working with CPS, we've been working with some of the high schools to try and figure out how we can bring an entrepreneurial curriculum, but also an arts focus into some of these schools, and just see if we can teach these kids to think and not memorize.
And the creative concept, the design thinking approach, and how
listen, we learned at Flashpoint that if you say to somebody, I'm going to teach you English, they're gone. if you say, I'm going to help you with your script for your movie, they're all there, right?
They're 100%.
And you know, algebra, forget it. The budget for your music video, all day long, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a question of ownership, and it's a question of investment and making it personal to them. And you know, when kids say every single day that the most boring place they go is school, it's really frightening.
That's the
really
beginning of very bad things.
Yeah.
Back to, on a personal note, back to your interest in the arts. Years ago, how and why did you get involved in visual art?
You know, I was, well, first of all, I got involved in original art, which is important because when I was starting out, I was a corporate lawyer. I was making a lot of money. A lot of my peers who have become well-known artists across the nation, really, were struggling artists. And so one of the things we literally sort of were consciously trying to do was transfer some of this filthy lucre from being a corporate lawyer to, you know, over to them.
People who are trying to do something.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, this is the clearest thing I remember about the entire beginning of why I said I'm only buying real drawings and real paintings and real sculptures as opposed to prints or copies.
Right.
AT&T at the time had a procedure, and the procedure was that you could get a print in your office in corporate AT&T world, and the differentiation was, first of all, the higher up you were, the bigger the print.
Of course.
And second of all, the frames were better. Okay,
Yeah.
it was the same 4 pictures, right? And you know, and I'm like, this is insane. So we actually shamed them into beginning one of the first corporate collections in the Chicago area, and buying original art. And so that was part of the issue. And it's funny because people say all the time, well, do you spend a great deal of time with the artist? You know, and I don't at all because, A, that's not what artists are. You know, they're fundamentally asocial. They're sort of loners. And as a collector, it's a very hard conversation to say to somebody who spent 2 years drawing a painting that, you know, you want to pay a third of what they think it's worth.
Having a negotiation
Wonderland.
for their heart.
Right, yeah, exactly. And so, you know, there's a distance, but I mean, at the same time, it's been really exciting to be able to support really thousands of artists. You know,
Right.
so.
Well, in a sense, in 1871, you're supporting thousands of entrepreneurs.
You know,
and
building
career
a business.
changers
Yeah,
and-
building a business is just another form. I mean, it has all the components of being. I think artists have to be entrepreneurs today. I think
Yes.
everybody
Yes.
has to be entrepreneurial. You know,
Yeah.
the job description is not as critical as the fact that you have to take a greater degree of responsibility. You have to be a lifelong learner. You have to,
Right.
you know, understand that it's really on you to manage your career and your opportunities.
And this will become even more the case as people have more part-time roles, contract work, project-based
Yeah,
work.
it's going to be challenging because no sooner will some of those jobs, you know, sort of gen up
Right.
than they'll be eliminated by machines and things
Well,
like that.
let's wander to that now. You have a background as an educational innovator as well with
Right.
Rebecca Flashpoint Academy
And Kendall.
and Kendall College,
Right.
which
Right.
you was a cooking and hospitality school in Chicago that you resurrected basically.
Yeah.
It's doing quite well. So, given the changes of the next 20 or 30 years, how should we be training young people in new
Well, I
ways?
think we have to
or ourselves.
Well,
it doesn't
I think
have to
we
be
have
young
to.
people.
I think we have to train them to think. I think we have to train them to be problem solvers and to understand methodology and process as opposed to memorization. I mean, around here we believe in free speech, but at 1871 you can't say I don't know anymore. And the reason was
What
that
do you mean by that? I
well,
can't say I don't know. What do you mean?
it used to mean that you were just ignorant, okay? And we find that you can cure ignorance. Today it means you're lazy. It means you didn't do the research, you didn't look up the problem, you didn't do the homework, you didn't prepare.
Oh, I see. To the
So-
extent the answer's
right.
out there already.
It's always out there.
Well,
it's
there could be
100%,
new questions or challenges we don't know the answer
you
to
know,
yet, right?
not in the context that we deal in every day. I mean, nobody is saying, I wonder if there's a particle that's named the, you know, the
So
buron
you're
or
saying
something.
like who would be the primary customers for this
Yeah.
offering?
Yeah, I mean, and so part, you know, I think that we need to get people trained to understand they're going to have multiple jobs and multiple careers.
Right.
They're going to have to do different things, and we have to stop measuring success in the schools by these old metrics that don't predict anything. You know, standardized testing is just horrible, so we're working with a school. We're going to see whether we can have a curriculum around entrepreneurship. And what's exciting to me is that not only has the entrepreneur become a rock star, there's just no question
Yeah.
that everybody knows Zuckerberg and all these people, but that wouldn't have been enough, except for the fact that the other two careers, the other two fantasy careers,
Sports
which
hero
were
and
jock and
star.
rock,
Yeah,
right?
jock
Okay.
and rock, yeah.
So jock is like, increasingly 5 years from now, you'll either be crippled or you won't remember your name.
Right.
So that's probably less exciting. And all the jocks want to be entrepreneurs. So
Yeah.
Michael Phelps announces he's going to look into being a technical, tech entrepreneur. And then on the rock side, they're all 65 or 70 years old.
Yeah.
And the younger ones, if you ask Jay-Z, he doesn't say he's a musician. He says he's a businessman. In fact, he says, I'm an enterprise.
Right.
So you've got these two things pushing the kids. It's cool. Smart is the new handsome. It's cool
Yeah.
to be an
In that sense,
entrepreneur.
and you've said this before, it's great because more people can succeed if they have the tools of business and the tools of entrepreneurship.
Right.
Then I hope I become part of the NBA.
Yeah, exactly. And we think that, it's never about what you wish for, it's what you work for. And,
Yeah.
and we're trying to teach kids that. And believe me, the lights go on. I mean, the lights go on. When you go into a school and you see the kids doing robotics, doing coding, whatever it is, they're excited.
They're engaged.
They're excited. We have to figure out how to get the rest of school out of their way, or how to append it in ways that's useful. So,
Well, to build on that, as you go through that journey with kids, it's one of the things you alluded to is not just problem solving, but there's a real capability to problem definition
yeah.
and
yeah.
selection. How do I define the problems and then prioritize them and say, these are the ones I'm going to go after because that's going to have the biggest benefit?
Well,
and that's a skill.
It's a skill. I mean, our test, I was just at the Latin school, and
Yeah.
I
A
great,
great private school
yeah.
here in Chicago.
I mean, I said one of the great wastes about life is, you wouldn't want to look back and say that you spent a great deal of your time working on something that really doesn't matter.
Right.
And so the first gate here is we'd like somebody to come in and say, not I want to make a lot of money, but to say I want to make a difference. And making a difference has to do with identifying those problems. And one of the scary things here is people still think that you can build an app and there's any way, shape, or form that the world will ever see that. And I try not to be
a billion
the
apps
bad.
in the market.
Yeah, 48,000 a month in the Apple Store alone. I mean, I try to be supportive, but we tell everybody you better find a train, you better find a channel or a path that's already there. And if you can append what you're doing, or if you can be clever or be additive, that's fine. But we see so few businesses that are likely to be standalone billion-dollar businesses, maybe never, right? So the model has to be different, which is, again, this 20 to 50 thing. The model has to be build it to be bought, which also informs, by the way, whether you want to take $50 million in, right? Because if you can make it on 5 or 10 million and demonstrate directionally a solution, there's plenty of people that'll bankroll it beyond that. But if you take 50 million in, you have no prospect whatsoever of returning some kind of reasonable return to your investors. So it's a bad.
Actually, that's a topic well explored by the TV show Silicon Valley.
Right.
So
right.
I would advise our viewers to see that. So let's follow this another moment, and that is this not 20 to 50 million for exits, but instead the 20 years old to 50 years old.
Right.
It's again something that you've had some success with here, which is
Sure.
people of all ages engaging together. And what can the educational system or the way we educate ourselves as human beings learn from that experience here?
Well, I think that we're going to have to understand that it's not going to be the sage on the stage. It's not going to be top down. The only classroom that's going to work in the future is a differentiated learning environment where each person is in front of a device. And it may be their phones, because the truth is the phone is powerful enough now to do that. And each of them, so a classroom is going to look like 25 people, but it'll be 25 people on a different path. And the teacher will sit in front of a dashboard and be basically a coach.
Yeah.
And these 20 people will be on par, and these 3 will be remedial, and these 2 will be extra credit. And she'll be able to tell who she needs to work with. And you won't have what we have today, which is lockstep, lowest common denominator, all these different things. You just won't do that. But ultimately, the big shift is what Sal Khan talks about all the time, and that is the shift from how much time did your
Saul Khan, the founder of Khan Academy,
yeah.
with lots of online
Well,
free
and
access.
basically two
Free
things.
access to
Yeah, but
education.
two philosophies of education. One is we can't measure success by how long your butt was in the seat.
Right.
It has to be, did you master it or not? And he
Right.
tells this unbelievably great story about if you were building a house and you got the foundation 80% built, and went onto the first floor
right.
and got that 85% built, by the time you got another floor up, the thing would fall over, right?
Right.
So, mastery is a lot different than sort of this social promotion or longevity or anything else.
Right.
But what I'm really seeing is when kids have mastered a skill today, a kid who's playing guitar rarely learned it from the old blue-haired, teacher, piano or guitar teacher. Either they went to the School of Rock and they learned it by actually standing there with some other kids their age, or they sat down and watched 100 YouTube videos and they learned to play and master some of these things. And this self-learning methodology is all part of this same, I don't know conversation. It's there, and you have to apply yourself. I mean, to me, the other big risk is we keep talking about who's coming up the pipeline.
Yeah.
The real risk is these companies, major corporations, are absolutely not investing in upskilling people who are 50.
Yes.
The only company in the world, I think, that's figured this out may be, of all things, AT&T again, which has a program. This is a frightening and shocking program, but they have a program that says, in 2 years, to each employee, in 2 years, here's the skill set that you're going to need to have to be a contributing citizen, 2 years, okay, to our company. Here are the courses that are going to get you there. We'll pay for 100% of those courses. You do them on your own time. Now, this is powerful. This is saying, look, this is objective. Here's what we need. It's fair. It's like I told you what it was going to take. Don't be surprised in 2 years if you're the one who didn't bother to add to your skill set. But people who are 50 years old without digital skills are more at risk. And also, the worst part of that is they're not going to be around for 15 more years.
Yeah.
They're going to be around for 30 more years.
It's interesting, Howard, you mentioned AT&T. So Ken Fenoglio, who runs, recently retired from AT&T University, has been part of that. And I remember a number of years ago, our dean, Sally Blount, said a lot of the most innovative things going on in executive development, et cetera, are happening at corporate universities because they're closer to the market. They feel the pain.
Well, and GE set the model.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of the jobless economy, there's a couple of ideas. One is 3D printing and the associated technologies. And, we tell the story of the car dealership, and 30% of the parts,
The plastic parts
that are shipped each week cost more to ship the part than the part cost. Those will certainly be printed on site with no transportation cost and no inventory cost to speak of. That's a smart job. That's an expert job. That's not the guy throwing out the used oil at the dealership. So that's a fair trade. What happens, though, to the people that were transporting those parts, that's a different conversation. So part one is that, we will be creating, and everybody says this about the agricultural economy, that we had 90% of us were on the farm way back when, and guess what? Those jobs went away, but we're not, grossly unemployed in this country because other jobs came along. I think this is a different kind of change. I mean, I think that this is a wholesale elimination. I think the largest job category in the city of Chicago may be driver, maybe truck driver.
And it's a good job. Being a long-distance truck driver, you can raise a family.
Yeah.
It's a good job.
But I think that we're getting pretty close to where a lot of this transshipping, I mean, Chicago is a nightmare for the trains and everyone else to get through and across. All that's going to have to be automated and streamlined in really significant ways. So I think that where we're really at is this. If you have a job where the goal is to make 0 errors and to execute the job every single time in the same fashion, then eventually that'll be done by a machine. And the best of the people who can do that job are worth twice what the worst player is. So the best surgeon is maybe 2x in terms of the value. And by the way, you wouldn't want a surgeon to be innovative or creative.
Yeah,
You
while-
want him
while
to do
they're- yeah.
you want him to
You
do
want
it
them to
exactly
innovate on
right.
somebody else.
That's right.
Yeah.
You want him to do it exactly right every single time. Okay, now, but those jobs are going away. Those jobs are going to be automated or rule-based jobs, basically. Over here, you have creativity. You have creative jobs, where, by the way, the span is not 1x or 2x. It's 10x, the best creatives.
I see.
And there,
The
you want to
span between
encourage
an average human
person,
being
right.
and the greatest.
You can hire. I mean, hiring one really good person is worth about 3 regular people, and it's worth it every single time. Especially because we just don't need that number of bodies, and this is part of the jobless thing. But the other thing is that on this side of the equation, errors are, mistakes are, failures are absolutely encouraged, and they're part of the game.
Right.
So you have these two different mindsets. Our schools are still 100% stuck in the,
Zero
you got to get
failure.
it all right, zero failure, crazy in this world where
Yeah.
we just don't know what we don't know, and that's all part of the same issue of migration. But I think that the tension between smarts and steel in Detroit, I mean, smarts is killing it. I mean, we're just, every 6 months, the likelihood that a car will be nothing more than a metal container is increasing. They're spending a huge amount of time and energy on entertainment systems because basically we'll be passive passengers,
Right.
so we might as well.
Self-driving cars.
Yeah, self-driving, and also.
And a couple years ago, nobody in the global automotive industry was paying much attention,
Right.
and now everybody is.
Well, and also, just let's be clear, your insurance company will be calling you up and saying, we're going to cancel your insurance if we catch you driving.
Personally,
we're happy
yeah.
to insure you. And all these ethical, things are coming along. But I think what's going to happen is, the first thing we'll see is that we'll carve out maybe 15-block radius or square in the central cities of most central cities, and they'll just say no cars, just no cars. And the transports will be self-driving, vehicles of some kind that will move people around. What amounts to the last mile. This is the dilemma. The trains get you to a certain point. It's how do we have a ubiquitous system. It's almost like people movers. It's just, and they may not even be mobile.
Well, I think it's interesting with the self-driving vehicle, what we call the last mile in telecommunications and transportation.
Right.
When you can do it as a self-driving mechanism, everybody who already lives there takes advantage of it. So it really becomes the first mile, as opposed to the last mile. It becomes the first mile, and then it all works better.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's build in this direction. You see a lot of things here at 1871. You see things around the world as one of the ambassadors for Chicago worldwide in technology and business. What are some trends or technologies that you think that corporations and investors really need to be paying close attention to? And I'm thinking the horizon of 5 to 10 years.
Well, I think everything is going to be time-based. So, I mean, this remarkable compression of everything has to be right now is something. I mean, we're seeing email going away. It's just absolutely going away in favor of messaging. And that's because it takes about 90 minutes to respond to an email and about 90 seconds on average to respond to a text. We open less than 25% of our emails, and we, because texts are interruptive, we respond to about 98% of them. So
Which
we're
is
seeing,
an issue for our attention
of course,
as well.
Of course,
So we have to start to manage that.
And by the way, Yale 4 years ago did a survey of a goldfish and a human, and it was about 13-second attention spans each. It was
a goldfish and a human. Who won?
No, 13 each. 13
We're about the
seconds.
same.
Well, yeah, but today they updated it. The goldfish is holding its own at 13. We're at about 10 seconds.
So
Our attention span is actually diminishing. So, but anyway.
So they're going to start having parties where they drop us down toilets.
Yeah. So we think time is number one. We think customization, personalization, mass customization is 100% of the game because, if you haven't gotten one of these notifications from Detroit that the car you sold 4 years ago is up for service, it's like on what planet could they not know this?
I'm getting a call every 2 weeks about that from a car we sold last year.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. So personalized data, customization. Nobody wants to wait for anything. Everybody is time constrained.
Right.
All of that is every business is going to have to compete. But I have a new phrase. I have a new metric. So I've gotten rid of CSI, which is Customer Satisfaction Index. I've gotten rid of Net Promoter.
Net Promoter, right.
And what I'm using now is what I call, the CES, which is the Customer Effort Score. And what that means is, and every single company is now going to be judged through this lens, how easy is it to do business with me? And if it's not, I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, and businesses are going to have to sit down. And it's funny, I gave a talk this morning, and literally the guy afterwards came up and said, our customers say that all the time. They're like, why is your online application system so confusing? Why is it? And I'm like, well, guess what? They're going to say that twice more, and then they're going to go.
Yeah.
Because our definition of loyalty today is really interesting. We don't think loyalty is, you're stuck and you have embedded cost and switching cost. We think loyalty means nothing more than the person hasn't seen a better alternative yet.
Yeah.
And the minute they do, they're gone.
And actually a lot of businesses, especially business to business, but not exclusively, they assume that how we've been doing business is the way that business is done.
Right.
And they don't even question, could we be doing it very differently to enhance
Well, and
customer-
that's where it's one of the greatest learnings here has been that what is a nightmare fear for a startup, which is fast followers, is the exact same concern that the big companies should have, but they're reluctant to look inside these exact same processes where there's a ton of spaghetti code and take it apart and build a new solution that's 10 times faster. And they should, because they know what the inputs are and they know what the outputs are. Just as the fast follower knows, you were the pioneer, you have all the arrows in your back, 12 more people come along and offer the same service you think you invented.
Right.
Cheaper, faster, more, right? So we need to apply that methodology of looking at the processes in these big companies and figuring out how can we drain the noise, the friction, all of the problems out of them to streamline them. And by the way, that's pretty low-hanging fruit.
Right. Well, there are two challenges there. One is streamlining, becoming far better at what you already do.
Right.
But then simultaneously exploring the future.
Yeah.
What are we going to be needing to do in 3 years or 5 years that we're not doing today?
Yeah. And I've, in terms of what I've seen in the recent past, in terms of really excitement, I'm most excited about very simple, very straightforward tools that we're building today in two areas. One, we're building bots. And unless you've seen this work, it's hard to understand that. So we just looked at our employee onboarding process.
Okay.
15
At 1871.
15 hours.
Okay.
15 hours. Something like 85 steps.
Okay.
The bot will do it in 1 minute. In 1 minute, the bot will issue all of the instructions, all of the emails, all of the scheduling for key cards, for insurance registration, for security, for passwords, for access things, everything streamlined. And that's where we're headed. We're going to take these processes that were the way we used to do business, and we're going to smash them together. So that's one thing that I'm very excited about. And where we're seeing that most, that's really powerful, is frontline customer service people are going to be made much smarter by augmented intelligence, not replaced, because the consumer is going to still want to talk to a human being, but if that human being never has to put them on hold and ask a supervisor, because they're 30% more effective because they have a robotic tool to help them, the supervisor leverages themselves over 10 more people and focuses on the hard problems, and these tools permit your frontline people to be a lot smarter. So that's one that's been exciting. The other one,
augmented intelligence.
Yeah. I prefer that to artificial intelligence, because if you say to a doctor, the two words that are acceptable today are augmented intelligence and decision support. AI is frightening. But if you say to a doctor, I'm going to make you a better diagnostician, because the computer has looked at 1 million instances of retinal damage. In your lifetime, you'll see 57, if you're lucky.
Right.
It can tell you so much more, and then you can make the proper diagnosis. Why wouldn't you want that resource, right? Why in the world wouldn't you want? All right. So that whole idea of augmented intelligence is going to be a lot more palatable to a lot of career people, a lot of professionals, and we need that language, just like we need the language in these big companies that isn't threatening to the status quo.
And I would extend that insight to the conversation we had about working with young people.
Yeah.
I would extend that insight to education, in the sense that we have so many more tools at our disposal today, and heck, 10 years, 20 years, that do so many different things in so many different ways.
Right.
One of the skills we have to learn is how to know which tools to use.
Well,
what's available and how do we know what to use when?
Yeah, we have degrees of measurement and accountability that just didn't exist in the past.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and as a result, every business today, including education and healthcare, is going to be about 2 words. The first word is transparency, which is everybody will know everything you're doing, your competitors, your vendors, your customers. And the second word is efficacy. They'll know how well you're doing it. And if you're not doing it well, they'll go somewhere else. If you're not doing it fast, productively, economically, appropriately, they'll just go somewhere else.
And
I mean,
they come together at the transparency of efficacy,
exactly.
which will be laid bare for people.
Absolutely. I mean, doctors just don't understand this at all. Doctors think that patients live in a vacuum. We've done these surveys, and it's frightening.
And this is part of the environment that you work in, anyone who's here at 1871, or these new kinds of organizations that are focused on performance and output, as well as culture and values.
Well,
and you can't hide behind your title anymore.
But let me also say that if you want to be depressed, I mean, think about, you know, the extent to which the consumer today is so focused on speed, access, and convenience that they don't care about quality. Increasingly,
in many cases,
they
like
don't
fast fashion.
Increasingly, they don't care about price.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the dash button, this is my favorite thing in the world now, the dash button, which is a tool that Amazon created. And, you know, it's now been virtualized, so it now appears on your computer as well. But here's a button that says, you put it on your washing machine, and when you pour the last of the Tide out, you press the button, and in an hour and a half, there'll be a new bottle of Tide waiting at your door. Now, try to be Downey. Try to be someone who thinks they're going to get in the middle of that transaction ever again,
that process.
ever again, and try to, you know, get your head around the fact that the consumer doesn't care. They don't even know what they're paying. You think they care? You think that they want to save 15 cents? That button is so seductive that you're going to have pantries now. You know, Samsung at CES introduced a refrigerator where you could order Grubhub, Spotify, Uber, you know, because they're figuring out that the kitchen is a hub for a lot of family assembly spaces.
And that sort of vision has been around for a couple
forever.
decades, but it hasn't been real until recently.
And it's real because of the demand side. The delivery side is what's made it real. Because if it was just ordering, you know, we go to the grocery store, and you should understand that 70% of what you buy at the grocery store every week is the same stuff. This is a prescription for automated replenishment.
Right.
Just totally. It's just, we're just not going to do that anymore.
And a complexity here, though, you say they don't care about the price, but a complexity really is, in some cases, they don't care about the price.
Right.
And in other cases, they care about the price a lot. And you have to figure out.
I don't want to be speaking for the 1%. So I get that Amazon Prime is an insane service compared to Jet.com, which says, why in the world would I send you a toothbrush when if I sent you to wait 2 days and I'm going to send you 3 more products in the same package that everybody's going to win?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but having said that, I think that the answer is that we'll see a new kind of curve. And this curve will say that if a product's price is less than X dollars, whatever it is, I don't know what it is, that I'm indifferent to a price that is 10% greater or lesser in perpetuity.
I see.
In perpetuity. I
That
think I
range
just don't
of
care.
price elasticity.
And it
for
depends.
demand.
If it's a $5,000 thing, interestingly enough, maybe I care a little bit more. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I used to, whenever I would go buy a Mercedes, the salesman would say, you know, you make too much money to pay attention to this. Let me worry about the car price. You go build your business. That's where you're making the money.
Did you buy that?
Of course.
Okay, well, good for you.
Of course.
So, speaking of what has not become real but might in the future, what is a piece of prevailing wisdom about how our future might look? It could be anything that you believe it might look very different.
You know, I think that. You know, a long time ago, I used to say that free isn't cheap enough, you know, and so I think that we have a view, at least a significant portion of the population thinks that a lot of things are going to be, whether it's socialization or, you know, whatever you want, socialism, whatever you want to call it, that a lot of this stuff is going to just appear and be provided for us by as a byproduct of technology, and I don't see that. I don't see that happening. I mean, I don't think that in many respects we're going to have universal health care and universal this and universal that. So I don't.
What do you see instead?
Well, I see a transaction-based economy, but the nature of the transaction is going to be very variable. I mean, for years, probably 5 years now, people have had all kinds of schemes around selling our data. Personal data. Like,
right.
You'll pay me $5 and I'll sell you my. That's never going to be a viable large-scale business. On the other hand, we're going to have a portfolio, a portable portfolio of all of our mission-critical information. And we'll decide on a case-by-case basis how much or how little we're going to share with each person. So I always say, if you're laying in the street, do you want the paramedic to know that you have an allergy? Of course you do.
Whatever
right?
I've got, you
Of course,
have.
it's exactly right. But you don't want to have a drug manufacturer necessarily know that, and you certainly don't want your employer to know that you have certain kinds of diseases or conditions.
Right.
So we're going to figure it out, because fundamentally we're lazy. We don't really care about privacy. We share these things, because it's easy and it's convenient.
Right.
And so I think what's going to happen is that little bundle, in fact, is going to grow and get smarter and smarter. For today, J. Crew doesn't know whether you're a male or female for the purposes of sending you advertisement, which is almost criminally stupid. Amazon doesn't really know everything you previously bought. So the Amazon recommendation engine, which results in almost 35% of their business now, doesn't know that I already bought a book from Amazon. It still recommends that book.
That's
to me.
surprising, and
Yeah.
that goes against
Frightening.
everything
Just
we
frightening.
believe about Amazon.
Just frightening.
But
you have to actually click on the thing and say, I own it already.
And I think it's safe to assume that over the next decade they'll get a lot better at
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Which is what
Absolutely.
you're saying.
Yeah.
So many people are talking about how we're going to live for 140, 150 years into the future. So let's imagine there's a Howard Tullman 50 years from now, which I hope there will be.
Right.
There's a Howard Tullman 50 years from now. What would you want to tell your 50 year from now Howard Tullman? What would you want to tell yourself today?
I mean, I think we're engaged in this enormous glut of conversation, and I suppose the single most prominent piece of wisdom I'd like to let my future self share with my current self is that you can't win a race with your mouth.
Say that again.
You can't win a race with your mouth. I mean, it's like you can talk all you want about this stuff, but you have to actually put your head down and do it. And that's if there's one ethic here, if there's one thing we're trying to teach these generations, it's that nothing happens by itself. Everything today is team-based, which is another component. And you don't get ahead by talking about it. You get ahead by doing it, and doing it repetitively and incrementally better, and raising the bar. I mean, I think that the improvements in our lives that have come from sort of the ability to get better by getting better. I mean, it's the 10,000 hours. Mm-hmm. But we believe that work is the defining discipline around here, and that's something that, I just wish all these kids would get that. I wish all these professional athletes would get that. We're doing a project with the Cubs, very interesting. It's all focused on the minor leagues, because the guys who get to the majors sign these contracts, they don't listen to anybody anymore.
But the minor leagues are aspiring.
Absolutely.
They have their eye on the prize.
And by the way, they invest.
And they'll do what it takes.
They invest $3 or $4 million in the life of those guys, starting when they're 15 or 16 years old. So you bet both sides are motivated to make that successful.
So we could perhaps say, just do it. We could
we could say that what I always say, which is you don't get what you wish for, you get what you work for. Right.
Well, Howard Tullman, in your career as a serial entrepreneur, and I'll say that again, serial entrepreneur, in your career as an investor, as a patron of the arts, as the lead of this great organization here in Chicago, you've certainly lived that many times, doing it over and over again. Karl Marx said on a number of occasions that a driver of late capitalist society would be vanity. I think we see that quite a bit You've added another one here, and I think that is laziness. Laziness will be a driver of a lot of what business needs to do for us, because that is one of the things that we desire.
Yeah,
But at the
and,
same time,
and by the way, it creates tremendous opportunities.
tremendous opportunities, not just to do it for us, but also to encourage people who aspire to do it, to go out and do it. So there's an interesting contrast between what humans want on the day-to-day basis and what they want in terms of purpose. In terms
Well, you know,
of
it's funny,
action.
Rob, that you mention that, because I'm doing a series of talks for a very large investment organization, and one of the focuses is to say to them that they can no longer be thermometers; they have to be thermostats. And what
What
that
do you mean?
Well, because their client base is demanding not simply that they give them a
I see.
research
I
report,
see.
not simply that they be
You
measurers.
need to be able to turn it up and down.
You have to add value.
Yeah.
You have to do a service for me, otherwise I'll find somebody else. Anybody can keep score. I mean,
Right.
I don't, and so it's really interesting, because these big organizations are trying to, their customers are, financial advisors.
Yeah.
And those financial advisors are scared to death that a machine can do a lot better of constructing a pro forma portfolio for most of their advisees than they will ever do.
The robo-advisor.
The robo-advisor. And so this coming world has a lot to do with how do you engage and build connections. And it's what you said originally. People still want to talk to people.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, at least for the next generation or so, we're not concerned about robo-entrepreneurs, at least not yet, maybe in a while. But you've been an entrepreneur your whole life in various ways. Give us 3 words or less that summarize the experience of being an entrepreneur. Hyphens are acceptable.
Perspiration, perseverance, and principles.
Howard Tullman, thank you very much.